Hi everybody. So my name is Effie and I'm a geography major, and my course thread is Humanities and Environment. But it's like Humans and Environment. I'm not sure that's the title. Humans and Environment? Humanities and Environment. Very nice. So I wanted to start off by giving you a little sentence that is I've always loved geography, and I came up with this sentence when I was in high school. It goes, "Geography rules the world because it is the world." Right? So it's one of these majors that it's almost automatically interdisciplinary. And I took in my course there 5 different classes, and even though they cover 4 different departments, all of them I made count for my geography major because geography is like that diverse and got so much going on with it. So the course thread that ties them all together that I found from my classes is that they looked at the binary that has been created between nature and culture. So I think it's quite a big thing to talk about at Berkeley. So this is one way we can look at it. Ta-da! So this is what a binary looks like, classically. So you've got, on one side, you've got nature and culture. And another way to think about it is nature being the environment and culture being humanities. So the name of this course thread is reflected right from the start. So basically, this course thread was made for it. So we looked at in all these classes how this idea came to be. This is a bit of a more complex binary that you might also be familiar with. This is like a bit more reasonable, right? We can imagine that in nature there is a lot of things that aren't really cultural, so they're going to be a bit separate, but then a lot of it does overlap. Through this course, however, this is how I see nature and culture. This is what it teaches us. Like there's no way to separate it. This, of course, is not the dominant way of thinking, but these Berkeley classes have all come together to explain why this might be the actual best way to look at nature and culture and humanities and the environment. Okay, so my first class I took was called Justice, Nature and the Geographies of Identity. And I took it my first year at Berkeley, and the teacher was called Jake Kosek, yeah. And so how it started off is that we talked about, he showed us a slide on the screen, and I don't have the exact slide, but it was a tree, and it had been trimmed, so it was a square. So it's like a human had obviously gone up onto the tree and created a square tree, because you can't really find many square trees up in like proper nature, right? So I don't have that slide, but I have an equivalent. This is from my hometown of Las Vegas. This is the Treasure Island Casino, and well, it's recently been changed to the TI, but 10 years ago. But this is the outside. I don't know if you can see it, but there's these palm trees that kind of curve around in weird shapes. So there's one over here, and there's one this way and this way. And I remember driving past this when I was little and asking my mum, what is up with those trees? How are they possibly making those weird shapes? And she told me that, well, a human decided which way the tree was going to grow. So that was like a really big intro into the class, that there's these things that we think of natural, these things that are in biology that come from the earth, but the humans still have this huge impact on how they come to be and how they develop and how they change. One of the projects we did in this class was we had to go out into Berkeley, into the city, and find an example of when nature and culture come together. And so for me, nowadays, I could probably find anything in any room and be like, this is when nature and culture comes together. But when I first started off as a freshman, I was all like, I have no idea what we're going to do. And my small group had to think really hard to find something. And we were like tracking through the Berkeley downtown, and eventually we came across these leaves. And it was quite a good example. There was leaves on a hedge. So obviously the hedge has been planted there. But on them, someone had written like expletives on it. Like I think it was like near the high school kind of. But that was like, this is a clear example where culture and nature are coming together in one. So that was a fun project. This is like more into like what we did talk about in the class as the semester goes on. So let's look at this slide. We see that this is a forest fire, right? So in this class we'd analyse, is this a natural disaster? Is this a human-made disaster? Is there separation between the two? We talked about how, so, okay, this is a forest fire and this is an urban fire. They both got fire involved, but they seem like really different things. Like this is obviously in a city, this is out in the wilderness or something where there's like deer and things. So But we did look at that for the first fire, the forest fire. Yes, nature, in a sense, has created it in that the Santa Ana winds. This is in Malibu, and I don't know if this one is, but in our class, and that the winds have made the fire get stronger. But then again, has the human suppressions of fire throughout the years, trying to prevent forest fires, make it so that they're more powerful, was it started by arson, or was it started by lightning? We don't really know, but does it really affect the results? And because it was an environmental justice class, the result was what the really important thing was. So we looked at how, so there's both, okay, let me restart again. So the important thing was that it was like how privilege plays into this. So who can afford to live in lands that are going to be destroyed by natural disasters? It's only people who can afford to rebuild them. And then it's kind of using ways that nature uses a scapegoat to blame things. So rather than looking at the structural problems that make people suffer, or make people affected by disasters, it's looking at just saying, oh, it was nature, we couldn't help it. This is a very complex class, but this is how one attempt to describe it. So the main call of the class was that there's a separation of nature and culture that has come to be constructed, and that we use that in ways that we destroy the natural environment, and then it affects some people more than it affects others. Okay, so this class, the next one, this is 2 classes. These were a bit more simple to explain. They make my brain a bit less, it was a more relaxing class and really enjoyable. So it was American Cultural Landscapes, Part A and Part B. So it goes 1600 to 1900 and the 1900 to present. And it was a geography class, but it was also in the American Studies department, an environmental design class. So a lot of people take this class. They're really big lecture halls. And they're pretty cool because it's based on slides, and then it's a US history class, really. And then, so what happens is, what the main point of the class is looking at the built environment and understanding history through how it physically was at different time periods. So we look at slides and we make clues based on the pictures of how life might have been lived there. And one big way in that this tied into the course thread is that there was a thing called axioms that the teacher described. And one of the key ones was the geographic or ecological axiom, which says elements of a cultural landscape make little cultural sense if they are studied outside of their geographic context. So in other words, that everything that's created, you have to think about the geography it's in and the nature around it. Okay, so for the first half of the class, it's 1600 to 1900. So one example we can see this play out is in colonial times. So if people came over on ships and they settled here, what areas of the colonies are they going to settle down in? In New England, there's a rocky coast and there's a lack of coastal plains, so ships can't come inland. And there's also historical continental glaciation. So there's rocky soils, it's frostier than England or Germany, wherever they're coming from. You have to fence off cattle. But then on the other hand, it's also, there's all these natural grasses and things and climates you have to work with. This is nature, we can't help it. But then again, we're coming in, we're choosing where we're going to settle, and also we're bringing in things from around the world. So culture and nature are always going to play together no matter what time period you're looking at. Okay, so then in the next section for the Part B class, this is another example. And this is a picture from the Dust Bowl in the Great Depression era. And we looked at, a lot of the class looked at farming and industrialization of farming and how it's grown. And we make us look at, does it matter how that farming has become more industrialized over the past 100 years, that now there is strip planting and there's different ways that we're managing the environment and we're trying to change the land. And one big point in this, as we read a book, I can't remember the name of it right now, but one big point is that in this era, in the 30s, you might know the thing how people tried to control the land. So it was land that wasn't meant to be farmed. And, well, we can't say what it's meant to do, but realistically, it would be very hard to farm over a long period of time in the extensive ways that they kept on trying to get more and more productivity out of the land. So in that way, if you're separating nature and culture's trying to control nature, then you can see that there's going to be results that like this. It kind of relates back to the environmental justice questions that came up earlier. So in all landscapes, nothing is devoid of culture, and it's not separate or something that we can control. And then it's just this class was about looking at that and seeing that in everything. Okay, and then this is a geographical imagination seminar. It was quite a cool class, but it was more focused on writing. So every week we would read a different book that had related to geography in some way or the other. So even though what we really focused on was how the authors made their arguments, because they were geography topic books, it does relate to the cool stuff, because everything that's geography, somehow you can pick out things that relate to the culture, nature, binary, and questioning that. Here's one example I wanted to bring up. So this is a salmon. Is that the singular of salmon? A salmon? This is a salmon, and it's swimming in the river. It's all very nice. But it reminded me of something we read about in my environmental justice class in my first year, and how so the book we read in this class was about salmon in general and how some certain species are getting pushed to extinction because of overfishing and changing their routes, and they can't spawn in the rivers and all these kind of things. And we talked about a lot in the first class about the Columbia River and how we've built all these different dams in it, and we've changed the course of the river, and it's kind of become a type of machine. So if it's a machine in that it's no longer has the same function it had 200 years ago, is it all cultural now? But no, it's not, because it's still a river, it's still got water running through it that we have nothing to do with. So it's always a mix together. And it also asks us to challenge that idea of that there's something pristine that we can go back to. So if conservationists want salmon to be saved and we want to get rid of all the dams, there's always been change going on. There's always human and culture interacting with that river, and Native Americans have been there forever, for a long time, for example. This is another way to think about how you can't really separate nature and culture, and that they always interact. This is just another slide, just showing about some of the other books that we read. So we read the Michael Pollan book that talks about apples and how they've always been cultivated. Just these cool things in geography that keep coming up and again. We talked about the ideas of evolution and how humans and culture are shaped by the environment, and then books about just even environmental change and global warming. That's what it's called, global warming. So yeah, just how you can't separate the two. Okay, and this is the class I'm most excited about, and I'm actually taking it this semester. So it's in the Gender and Women's Studies department with one of my favourite professors, Barbara Barnes. I've taken 3 of her classes, I really like her. And it's an amazing intersection, because most of my papers, honestly, when I was doing geography classes, I made them about gender anyway. So to have a feminist geography class, it's made for me. I'm so excited about it. So it looks at also national bodies and national landscapes. I'm really into the idea of nations and that construction, and how people are so overwhelmingly into a formed idea of where they belong, and they're represented by one single. Anyway, okay, that's some geography nerding out. Okay, so this is one example of something we looked at in the class. These are some people going on an expedition to the North Pole. This is the Peary group. So in this case, we would look at how men use the Arctic and Antarctic tundra to show how they can conquer the natural world. And so what hasn't been touched is up for grabs, and a race between nations, an extension of imperialism, and just trying to use this split between nature and culture to say that we are people and we are going to conquer what has been untouched, which is still in this. This is more of the half overlapping nature and culture. This is not realising that altogether, because it's we're the last bits of culture that haven't been, and we're going to go into the nature. Does that make sense, kind of? Okay, nice. And so, yeah, and then also looking because it's a gender and women's studies class, we looked a lot about who is able to do this. There weren't women on this expedition. Are they included in travel writings? How it's an extension of imperialism. It's just a really interesting, complex class with a lot going on. Here's another example, and this kind of relates to how the class was called National Bodies, National Landscapes. So we look at depictions of landscapes, and so through art or through movies and different types of media, film, painting, travel writing, and see how they've been portrayed and how that shapes the popular imagination of what nature is. So this is Yosemite, and it's one of the things we did a lot in this class is look at how national parks are created, because they are pure wilderness and they're something that has to be preserved. And so we analysed this and looked at different ways that how this isn't quite problematic. Like, it's a bit of an arbitrary definition. Wilderness hasn't even been defined in law, and it has to be 5,000 acres, and man has to be a visitor there. But so that means that culture, the man, is defining what makes wilderness. If it's 5,000, then that's a bit arbitrary, right? Just by the idea itself. And another thing that's really cool is that we just finished talking about this today, but like Yucca Mountain, bringing it back to Las Vegas. So Yucca Mountain is where they're going to be storing, maybe where they'll be storing the nuclear waste by Las Vegas. And if there's a separation of us from this mountain, then it doesn't really matter if we use it to put waste in it. But then if you look back and see how it's not expendable and how there's relationships that are within that mountain, how people see that mountain and how it's not just a separate thing that has no cultural value, then you might not want to put waste there, Okay, so to wrap up, I wanted to just talk about how human geographies have classes that do deal with humans and the environment and how we have shaped the world, but it also shaped us, and that we give what is natural, the natural world, its meaning. So I have this new name I would theoretically propose for my major. Would this name be more accurate? Because rather than being human and geography, they're so intertwined that it could just be one word, the human geography, the study of human Earth. Yeah, because we are humans and we are Earth. And another thing that, looking at the environmental justice classes and the gender studies classes, we have to say why the binary is problematic. So we can't blame, if we have a binary, we can blame nature for things, saying that it causes natural disasters. And we can have this idea that we are able to control it, like culture can control it. So, but then, we have GMOs now, and that has surprises that come along with that. And then we can choose to ignore it because it's not part of culture, but then that's global warming for you. And then if it's something that's like pure and something that is untouched, then it erases the marginalised people who haven't been thought out as being attacked, or it even says that things that happen to it from a distance doesn't matter. So if there's a piece of land that's in Alaska that no one has been on in 10 years, it's still affected by what pollution is going on in Nevada or by nuclear radiation fallout. Does that make sense? So everything is completely related. I made a little drawing on my PowerPoint skills. Ta-da! So this is just like another way of thinking how to unite it, and how it might not really do anything to just deconstruct this binary, but at least it makes us more aware of what's going on, and to think about, are there ways that by deconstructing this supposed binary and this dichotomy, that there is a way that we can all thrive on our Earth that we live in.